Dear learners, I am Christina Georgy, your academic counselor for the MEG program. I welcome each and every one of you to my session. So, for those who are attending the session online, let me remind you that this particular session is specially designed for the course code MEG 05, which is titled Literary Criticism and Theory. The aspects discussed here will be based on the official study material for the same. As per the requests of some of our learners, this session will be recorded by me so that this will help you in your effective preparation for the upcoming TEE. We will be having discussions based on the blocks of MEG 5. Towards the end of the session, we will discuss the important questions, namely the previous question papers as well. So, in our previous sessions, we discussed blocks 2 and 3 of your MEG 5 study material. Block 2 deals with classical criticism, whereas block 3 deals with romantic criticism. So, today we are going to have a detailed look at block 4. This block is titled New Criticism. So, this very term, new criticism, must be familiar to you because I believe all of you must have studied this as part of your BA course. Obviously, there must be a mention regarding new criticism. This is literally a new kind of criticism that emerged as a result of the traditional and historical criticism that has been in vogue ever since the classical era. So, if you look at your study material, this block, that is block 4, is also divided into units, namely 6 units. So, in the very first unit, we will see IRA charts. Thereafter, we will focus our attention towards T.S. Eliot, and later we will move on to F.R. Lewis, J.C. Ransom, Cleanne Brooks, and finally a quick mention regarding Wimsatt. So, all these names must be familiar to you. You must have heard these at some point in time while you are studying your BA course. I am very much sure that not many will be able to recollect all these details regarding these names and associated theories. But I am here to help you out. So, before we move on to this unit-wise discussion, let me give you a brief overview of new criticism. Is that fine? So, proceeding further to an introduction to new criticism. As you all know, new criticism is indeed an approach to literature, and in my introduction itself I mentioned it was developed by a group of critics in America. One interesting aspect is that most of these American critics taught at southern universities, that too during the years following the First World War. And the names that we saw when we discussed the units, most of them are new critics. They include R.C. Ransom, Alan Tate, Robert Penwarren, Cleanne Brooks, among others. So, what exactly did the new critics try to do? Let's have a look at that. They attempted, by they I am referring to the new critics, they attempted to systematize the study of literature. How exactly? They tried to develop an approach which was centered on the rigorous study of the text itself. That is, they focused their attention towards the text. Alright, close reading of the text was given importance. One interesting aspect is that this group was given their name by R.C. Ransom. His full name is John Crow Ransom, and he describes the new American formalists in his work titled The New Criticism, and this work was published in the year 1941. So if you look at the chief characteristics of the new critics, as I mentioned, close reading of the text was followed. That is, this new criticism as an approach was extremely formalist in nature and character. Hence, the new critics stress close attention to the internal characteristics of the text itself. The method of new criticism is foremost, as I mentioned, a close reading, thereby concentrating on the formal aspects. Which are the formal aspects? They include rhythm, meter, theme, imagery, metaphor, etc. So the interpretation of a text shows that these aspects serve to support the structure of meaning within the text. One interesting aspect to remember is that the aesthetic qualities praised by the new critics were largely inherited from the critical writings of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Just keep that in mind. The new critics privileged poetry over other forms of literary expression. Which are the other forms of literary expression? Apart from poetry, we call these as literary genres. Literary genres. Apart from poetry, there is prose, drama. Yes, correct. Yes, all these are the other forms of literary expression. But the new critics, focused on poetry. The reason is that they saw the poem as the purest exemplification of the literary values which they upheld. Nevertheless, the techniques of close reading and structural analysis of texts have also been applied to fiction, drama and other literary forms. So why did this new criticism emerge? Or why new criticism emerged as a popular literary approach? We can say that new criticism occurred partially in response to biographical criticism. What do you mean by biographical criticism? An interpretation based on the personal life of the author. Biographical criticism. So, this type of criticism understood art primarily as a reflection of the author's life. Alright, and another aspect is that this was also a response to new forms of mass literature and literacy. Okay, an increasingly consumerist society and the increasingly visible role of commerce, mass media, etc. Always remember, new criticism tends to emphasize the text as an autotelic artifact. What do you mean by autotelic? As if an independent entity. The text is seen as an independent entity, something complete within itself, written for its own sake, unified in its form and not dependent on its relation to the author's life or intent, history or anything else. New criticism also tends to emphasize the formal and technical properties of work of art. I understand some of you might find this difficult to understand or comprehend. Let me also explain in Malayalam. New criticismത്തിൽ പറയുന്നത് എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ഒരു ടെക്സ്റ്റ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഇൻഡിപെൻഡൻ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു എൻറ്റിറ്റിയാണ്. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ ആ ടെക്സ്റ്റ് കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ആണ്, അതിൽ തന്നെ സ്വയം പൂർണ്ണമാണ്. ആൻഡ് അത് അതിനായിട്ട് തന്നെ എഴുതപ്പെട്ടതാണ്. അതിൻ്റെ അകത്തെ ഫോർമൽ ആൻഡ് ടെക്നിക്കൽ പ്രോപ്പർട്ടീസിനാണ് അവിടെ ഫോക്കസ് കൂടുതൽ ന്യൂ ക്രിട്ടിക്സ് കൊടുത്തിരുന്നത്. ക്ലിയർ ആണോ? Good. Thank you for your responses. So when you look at new criticism, there are some concepts that you need to understand. Firstly, the heresy of paraphrase. Secondly, the fallacies, namely the intentional and affective fallacies. So all these aspects we will discuss in detail once we read through the units. I mean the units mentioned in your study material. So I suppose this would suffice as an introduction to new criticism. So shall we have a look at our study material in detail? Firstly, let me help you understand some basics regarding I.A. Richards. He is basically known as the father of new criticism. I.A. Richards is often regarded as the father of new criticism. In my introduction, I mentioned that it was J.C. Ransom who coined the term new critics in his work titled The New Criticism, published in the year 1941. So, in the introductory section of Unit 1 itself, you can find all these details. So, if you want to know more about R.C. Ransom, he is basically an American scholar, literary critic, poet and essayist. He is often regarded as the founder of new criticism. Moving on to I.A. Richards, he is generally considered as the most important theoretician in the first half of the 20th century. His full name is Ivor Armstrong Richards, shortened as I.A. Richards. He was also a Cambridge product. He studied at Cambridge. And he was a scholar of semantics. What do you mean by semantics? All of you must have studied MEG 04 titled Aspects of Language. There you must have studied what semantics is. So we were mentioning that Richards was a scholar of semantics. Yes, I saw the correct answer in the chat box also. Well done. Semantics is simply the study of meanings. Alright. So he was a scholar of semantics, and he, along with another scholar, formulated basic English. So what do you mean by the term basic English? Basic English. It's simply a very simplified form of English, and this was founded by two persons. One among them is I.A. Richards, we already know. The second person is named C.K. Woodston. Okay, so he is the second person, and both of them together formulated basic English. This is in fact a simplified form of English with a limited vocabulary. To be very specific, it has about 850 words, and these words are intended for international communication. It serves as a basic set of words that would help you ease in your communication. Alright, so that is what is called basic English. Apart from that, he has also collaborated in writing a work titled The Meaning of Meaning, which was published in the year 1923. Collaborated with whom? The same person, C.K. Woodston. So they both formulated basic English firstly. Secondly, they both collaborated in writing the meaning of meaning, which is an important contribution to linguistics. What do you mean by linguistics? Yes, I saw the exact answer in chat box. I knew that would come from Arun, but apart from Arun, I want to make sure that everybody knows it is the scientific study of language. Yes, you should be saying it is the scientific study of language. Alright? Yes. So apart from this particular work, he has also published works such as Principles of Literary Criticism. Note this one. This is very important. You need to study this work. That is Principles of Literary Criticism, published in the year 1924. I am not sure whether I have told you this because I deal with a lot of batches. If there comes an important work which is quite significant to your syllabus and also for your TEE, then I would suggest you to study the date also. Have I mentioned this before in class? And later he also published Science and Poetry, and this was published in the year 1926. And note this one, very important, Practical Criticism, and this work was published in the year 1929. Thereafter there was also one more notable work from him, Coleridge on Imagination, published in the year 1934. Yes. So, section 1.4 of your study material gives you a detailed explanation of Principles of Literary Criticism, which is basically a work by I.A. Richards. So, in this particular work, he sets out to establish a theoretical framework for what? For criticism. And this framework would be free from subjectivity and emotionalism. That is, he intends to follow an objective approach. When we look at I.A. Richards, his views on language is also important. I.A. Richards on language, this is given as if section 1.5 of your study material. There you have to study the two uses of language. Let me make this clear. Have you not studied these as part of your BA syllabus? Can you please respond? We have this as part of our syllabus, but I am not very sure whether. I won't be able to help you with the page number because since I have been teaching for a long time, the text that I have has a different page number because it is an old text that is with me. You might be having the new reprinted edition, right? Yes, thank you. It would be great if you could help each other rather than asking me. Yes. So, yes, make this clear. Have you studied this as part of your BA courses? It's okay. I understand that most of you must have come for studies after taking a break. Some of you must be very busy that you wouldn't remember. But at least if somebody could confirm. Okay. So, we already saw that Richards was very much interested in semantics. So, his first book, it is titled The Foundation of Aesthetics, published in the year 1922. And this book is also co-authored by two of his friends. One of them obviously must be C.K. Ochton. Another person, the third collaborator, is named James Wood. Thereafter, in chapter 4 of Principles of Literary Criticism, we see his views on the two uses of language. Which are the two uses of language? First one, symbolic use, and second one, emotive use. That is, he draws our attention towards the symbolic use of language in science and its emotive use in poetry. So, when you prepare for your TEE, you must pay due attention to these two uses of language. Be very sure that this concept was put forth by I.A. Richards. So, he continues his discussion of language in Practical Criticism. This is another work titled Practical Criticism, and it is in this particular work that he analyzes the 4 kinds of meaning. Remember, it was in the book Practical Criticism that I.A. Richards put forth the 4 kinds of meaning. Which are the 4 kinds of meaning? They include sense, feeling, tone and intention. Sense, feeling, tone and intention. Sense simply refers to the state of affairs or the items presented for consideration. By feeling, he means the whole range of emotional aspects such as attitudes, desires, pleasure, etc. What do you mean by tone? This is also something that you must have studied in MEG 4. Tone simply refers to the attitude of the speaker to the audience. Alright. And finally, intention. That is the speaker's conscious or unconscious intention, the effect he is trying to promote. So all these are given in details in your study material. I would ask you to study section 1.6 in detail. This is basically practical criticism, which speaks about something that he did when he was teaching at Cambridge. We can say that I.R. Richards more or less did an experiment at Cambridge. Let me speak about that because I feel like this is something that you need to be thorough on. So, I.R. Richards asked a sample audience in Cambridge to describe the responses to a set of poems. So, let me ask you a few questions. Who were the audience? Actually, his students at Cambridge. Yes. Then, what's so special about these poems? Yes, the interesting facts to note are the titles were not provided, the authors' names were not provided, and no clue concerning the background or the period in which the poems were written were provided. As a consequence, the students were totally new to those poems and they had no idea about any background detail regarding these 13 poems. So what he did was, the students were encouraged to read the poems more than once and they were given time, about a week's time, and what exactly were they asked to do? They were asked to write down their comments on this poems. So he had mentioned that he had 3 objectives. Which are they? Let's have a look at these 3 objectives. 1 was to document the contemporary state of culture. 2, to provide a new technique for responding to poetry. 3, to reform the teaching of literature. Here, a new critical approach was tried by him. And later, in his book, Practical Criticism, he analyzes the different mistakes of interpretation and evaluations that he saw in these responses. Which responses? The responses from those students, and he seeks to identify their causes as well. So your study material, the various obstacles study material provides catalogs, and the text has followed the system of numbering by alphabets used by Richards himself in this book, Practical Criticism. Let's have a quick look at these. The first one, the difficulty of making out the plain sense of poetry. What do you mean by that? A lot of readers fail to understand the real sense that is explained both as a statement and as an expression. There were also difficulties of sensuous apprehension. That is, many readers do not appreciate the sound, the rhythm, and even the movement of the text. There could be problems of imagery, that is mainly visual imagery, as some of the readers have a poor imaginative capacity. It differs from person to person. Remember what we studied when we spoke about Coleridge? Yes. Now the next one, mnemonic irrelevancies. The reader remembers some personal experience which is not relevant to the poem. Then stock responses, that is, the listener or the reader may have fully prepared views and emotions which are simply triggered off by the poem. Sentimentality, that is, at times the reader could be too emotional. Then there could be inhibition, that is the opposite of sentimentality. The reader experiences less emotion. Then there is doctrinal additions, that is, a clash could occur between the reader's own views and the views that he or she finds experienced in the piece of poem. There could be effects of technical presuppositions and also general critical preconceptions. That is, the reader may have preconceived notions about the nature and value of poetry. All these could create an obstacle between the reader and the poem. So Richards believed that when the obstacles are removed in a way of the poet communicating with the reader, He will be open to the poet's mental condition and can also experience the poem properly. So, in a way, we can say that he was not bothered by the problems of interpretation. So, that summarizes Unit 1 of Block 4, which deals with new criticism. In this session, we started off with a brief discussion on an introduction to new criticism, where I spoke about the various characteristics of new criticism, and also a few of the well-renowned new critics were introduced. Later, we focused our attention towards the life and works of I.A. Richards. Various aspects such as the two uses of language, four kinds of meanings, practical criticism, and others were seen. So, in our next session, we'll have a look at a few more new critics such as F.R. Lewis, John Co. Ramson, Cleant Brooks, W.K. Wimsett, and others. So, that's all for today. We'll meet again next day. Thank you so much for joining the session. Best wishes.